Hi, this is Derek Dieter from SQL Server Planet, and today we're going to go over how to troubleshoot a slow SQL server. What we're going to use is the SQLNexus tool in conjunction with the SQLDiag tool. Now, these tools are used internally in Microsoft, so they are very precise and they're very systematic. And let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is go to SQLNexus.codeplex.com, and here there's an installation. You're going to go to the common tasks, getting started, and you're going to begin the installation. Now, pretty much I'll run you through the installation. What it is you are going to download SQL Nexus and you're going to download SQL Diag. Actually, no, I'm sorry. You're not going to download SQL Diag. You're going to download the RML retrace download. You're going to download the performance scripts, and you're going to download SQL Nexus. So these three downloads are pretty much what you're going to do. The SQL Diag performance scripts is just a zip file. SQL Nexus is just a zip file. The RML utility, the retrace, is an installation. So you have those three things. I do suggest you go over this installation relatively carefully. Make sure you have everything done. And we're going to begin from an installed version already. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to run SQL Diag. And SQL Diag itself is already installed on all 2005, 2008 systems, so you don't have to download SQL Diag. What you have to do is just download the perf scripts that they provide. Now, these perf scripts are very useful because there's a lot of parameters that are required in order to get SQL Diag up and running. So you do want to download these perf scripts. I did try to fool around and not download those, but trust me, you need them. So you're going to download them, and you're going to open up a zip file, and in this zip file what you're going to do is you're going to extract it, of course, and then you're going to see a directory much like this directory here. You're not going to see the SQL Diag output, but you are going to see these three CMD, these commandlets in here, which will prompt a command prompt. So the only one we're interested in here is SQL Diag Trace 2008, so let's go ahead and click on that. Yes, we want to run it. Now it's asking me, do I want to overwrite the files that are already contained in the directory? Yes, I do, because I've run this before. So because I've run it before, I do have existing files. Okay, now it's beginning the initialization process, and what we see here is that it is going through, it's setting up profiler trace, it's setting up, it's grabbing hardware statistics, and it's setting up the perfmon trace. So these are all necessary, and they're all grabbing disparate pieces of information so that it can correlate together using SQL Nexus. So now that we see this green line here, we can see that our SQL Diag trace has started. It is telling us SQL Diag collection started. Press Control C to stop. So ultimately what we want to do here is we want to run for at least 15 minutes. If we don't run for longer than 15 minutes and we have a potential that we're not going to grab the biggest offender on the system. Why? Because if the offender does not return in 15 minutes, then you won't ever see it. So you do want to make sure to run this for as long as you think you may have a query running. That could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour, but that's what you want to run it for. And you want to also take into note that this is going to affect performance because it's grabbing a trace of every single query that's running on your SQL Server system. So there is a little bit of a performance hit for that. Now, you can weigh it out yourself, but let's go ahead and stop it here. We've collected enough for this trace here. So what it's going to do, it's going to write into the SQL Diag folder, and you can see I already have some information in here, but it's not completely populated. So because let's look at this SQL Diag SP trace, and this is actually the tracing of the stored procedures, and you see it's currently at 0 KB. So as the trace winds down, we are going to see that it's going to dump those files into this directory, and then we're going to be set to use our SQL Nexus tool. So it's still shutting down. It says it's getting SQL config reports, so there are some reports that are generated from this. Now, SQLDiag itself is, of course, an amazing and indispensable tool. Traditionally, it's a little bit difficult to interpret its output, which is why we're going to use the SQL Nexus tool in order to do that. Now, let's look in here a little bit. We see we have a SQLDiag.blg. That's the binary for the performance monitor script. So we see that we actually did capture a lot of performance monitor points. And let's see, still getting reports here. Let's give it another second. Now, ultimately, this is obviously going to be run on a production system. Now, when we move over to SQL Nexus, you're not going to want to run this on your production system. You're going to want to copy the SQLDiag output once it's completed to a non-production system, because it's actually going to create a new database. Okay, now we see more dumping going on. Okay, dumping is completed. So now we have all this information and we're ready to begin the SQL Nexus tool. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So let's open up SQL Nexus. SQL Nexus is not an installation. It's a zip file. In the zip file, you're going to extract it, of course, and then you're going to see a whole bunch of applications, or not applications necessarily, but a whole bunch of files in the zip file. We're only interested in one. SQLNexus.exe. So let's go ahead and run that. Let's run it as an administrator. Okay, now we see we're open here. So now it's prompting us to connect to a server. Now this is a SQL Server database server. We want to connect to, now remember, this is where we would typically want this on a non-prod system, because the server that we're going to connect to, it's going to actually create a new database on there. So let's go ahead and connect. And we see here, this is kind of like a CHM application, and what we want to do is we want to, well, let's look at the reports real quick. We see a whole bunch of reports on this left hand side. Not all of them work. This is kind of a buggy application, but we are lucky to have it. So what we want to do is come down here to data, and we want to click on import. So let's import, because we're going to import all of our diagnostic files. Now, I have run this before, so we want to actually clear out the previous database. So drop current DB before importing. You can click on that anyway. If this is the first time you run it, won't hurt. Click on import. Now it's asking me, are you sure that you want to drop the database? Yes, I am. So now we're beginning the import process. Okay, so now we get a command prompt that's actually opening up, and what it's doing is it's running the RML utilities that you downloaded and installed, and in that RML utilities is running the retrace. So it's actually reading the trace files that were created from the SQLDiag, and it's loading these into the new database that is created. So here we go. It's done reading the trace files. 9,736 lines processed, which is not too many. I'm not actually running on a production system here. I'm actually spoofing it a little bit. So some of the output is not going to be, may not be as comprehensive as what you may see, but it will be similar. So, okay, now we're done importing the performance statistics, it looks like. Okay, and it's completed. Still not responding. Let's wait for a respond. Okay, now let's close it. Now that we've closed that, we do have reports that are going to be ready for us to view. Just a little note here: bottleneck analysis does work. Let's see, blocking and wait statistics does work. SQL Server 2005 perfstats does work, and retrace main does work. My favorite is retrace main, because it gives me a little bit of a correlation between the system and the queries. So once we open up retrace main, we see that we have basically a little dashboard here, and it gives us a different views into the resource consumption. So we can view it by application, database, login, unique batches, unique statements. I particularly find the unique batches and unique statements to be most resourceful for me. Let's go ahead and look at those. Oh, okay. So unique statements does not work. You're going to find that this is a buggy application. And okay, so now what I just did was I clicked on this back button. A lot of times you would think that you can go here and go back to the main menu, but you can't. So make sure to utilize this back button. So it's actually unique batches that I actually end up using. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, report is being generated. Of course, I don't have a whole lot of statistics on this machine because I'm kind of just spoofing a load. But let's go and let's look at the 4 different categories that we see. So we have a breakdown of CPU, and it gives us here the query number that is associated with the most CPU usage. So we have, if we look here, we see 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 different queries that are executing here. Now, what's neat about this, let's go ahead and scroll down, and we see that we have these queries right here. So query 1 is here, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll scroll over, and we can actually drill down, and we see this query, the actual query text. So select asterisk from sales order detail, and we can actually click on this query and get more drill down information. So you can see how this is very useful in determining the most expensive queries during the time that you're running it. So we have more of a breakdown here. We have a breakdown that shows the view of exactly what was going on with this query during the time allotted. So let's go back and let's check out just a couple more things here. We also have over here, we have total duration. So we can correlate duration and CPU because CPU usage doesn't necessarily mean that well, let me rephrase that. If it takes a long time to execute, it doesn't necessarily mean it's using a lot of CPU. It could be caught up in the writes or the reads, or it could be caught up in another wait, like locking. So we see here, we're not going to get completely in depth with this. Hopefully this is enough to get you started. And let's go to perf stats, and let's real quick look at the blocking and wait statistics. And this gives us an actual breakdown of the waits that were occurring during this system. So we see that the biggest wait time was CPU. So we are CPU bound basically. And then we have network IO, so we're network IO bound. The client fetch. So then we come down, and there's a little bit more not so intuitive waits that we have here that I'm sure we can look them up on MSDN. So that's basically it. Hopefully this is enough to get you started, and good luck. Again, this is Derek Dieter from SQL Server Planet, and have a good day. Thank you.